So as the pandemic is pretty much over, we are now in a interesting area of deciding, what do I do? Do I continue doing virtual meetings or do I go back to doing in-person meeting? Do I do a mix of both? When is it appropriate? Who is it appropriate with? Do I like it? Do I not like it? So to answer all these questions that we all have, today we have with us Dr. Roger Hall, who actually explains to us in terms of what does it do for the brain? What does it do for the different personalities in person versus virtual meetings for our businesses? Let's go to my interview. Roger, thank you so much for accepting my invitation today.
I'm really grateful to be here. Thank you for asking me.
So, Roger, we're going to talk about a topic that is more prevalent now than obviously ever. There's a lot of questions around that. But before we get into today's topics around meetings, could you take a moment and introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm Dr. Roger Hall. I'm a business psychologist. What that means is I'm a lot like a sports psychologist who works on, a sports psychologist works on elite athletes to help them get their mindset right. And I work with elite entrepreneurs and business owners to help them get their mindset right so they can perform better in their workplace.
I love it. I love it. And we geek out on human behavior, like, like people probably geek out on sports, like we're all about like, oh, and then the human brain does this and people do this and, so we love that. But there's a specific topic I wanted us to address today because it is a question that I often get from my clients. And there's questions, questionings, concerns, but also like people just don't know what to do. Is that now that the pandemic is over, the hybrid model of having in-person meeting, virtual meeting is going to stay. And I often talk about like, we get to choose that. But a lot of people wonder, is there a difference between having an in-person meeting versus a virtual meeting? Is there one that's better for than the other? Like, what's a difference on a human behavior aspect?
Yeah, absolutely. There are lots of differences, and I don't want to denigrate remote meetings because they're incredibly valuable. I very often think, what would we have done if the pandemic came even in the early 2000s? We didn't have the internet technology to do that. Our experience, at least with work, would have been very, very different. So I don't want to discount that. But if we talk about how we interact with other people, there are lots and lots of channels of communication. So we get we get some of the meaning from the words that they say. But the whole nonverbal channels of communication actually carry far more meaning. And the way I'll illustrate this is I'm going to ask you to interpret what I'm about to say. Oh, I'm just fine. Now, the words I said.
I say that sometimes, not a good thing.
Yeah. Oh, I'm just fine. The words say I'm fine, but everybody who's been around people for any length of time knows that I don't really mean that's sarcastic. So when we look at the words, that's one part, but all of the nonverbals gives a greater sense of meaning. And we always believe the nonverbals. Well, what are the nonverbals? Well, the nonverbals are facial expression, which we can get somewhat on a video meeting. But we're not in person. We can't see the person quite as well. Now, if you and I had 36-inch video monitors, then we might, with really, really good cameras, we might be able to get those details. For example, in my interpersonal work, I can see when a person's eyes are becoming moist. They're not crying yet, but their eyes are glistening a little bit. Well, that's an important sign. You really can't see that on a video monitor. And so you've got facial expressions. Well, we're all really good at faking facial expressions. So if we're having this video conversation, most people can, for some period of time, fake their facial expressions. But if we look at the whole body leaks out how you really feel. So the tapping toes, the fidgetiness, and in these video meetings, we've gotten very good at knowing, okay, I've got everything below right here. You know, I can do anything I want and no one will know. And so there's a lot of data that we lose. So we don't have the same level of precision at viewing the other person, nor do we see anything off camera. And if I'm in a face-to-face meeting with you, we don't really have great language for describing what we're picking up, but we're picking up lots and lots of data about another person just by what we see. The audio here is quite good, but it's not quite as good as what we'd get in person. I want to talk about eye contact. Then I want to go to all of the things that we don't get on video. What we're doing here is we're almost looking at each other face to face. So my camera is slightly higher than your face. So if I was to look at what I perceive as your face, it'll look like I'm not looking at you to you. And so there's a disconnect on cameras. You know, perhaps the day will come when we all have 36-inch or 50-inch or 70-inch screens with a camera mounted immediately in the center of the monitor. And I'm sure somebody has figured this out. How do you get a high quality camera that doesn't distract? So we're looking actually eye to eye, face to face. Human beings, when we're meeting with each other, mutual eye gaze is really only about 10% of our conversation. So if you and I were meeting in person, we would look at each other's eyes only about 10% of the time. The listener, because you're listening now, you'll look at my eyes far more than I'll look at your eyes. But if we're honest with ourselves, not all of us are eye lookers.
No.
So there are some eye lookers, there are nose lookers, and there are mouth lookers. And so each of us has a different preference, and you can monitor this in yourself. The really empathic people are eye lookers, and there's a ton of behavior that happens just in our eyes. So we lose some of that detail by not being able to be eye lookers, and we miss a lot. I mean, we get a lot, but there's a lot that's less detailed. Then there's a whole other set of channels of communication that don't happen on video. One is touch, and human beings are physical creatures. Descartes talked about mind-body dualism, that the mind is separate from the body. And it's really created an error for all of our thinking since this philosopher kind of introduced this concept. The reality is our mind and our body are all integrated. And so what we know about physical touch is that it releases a chemical called oxytocin. And oxytocin is that chemical that makes us feel connected to another person. So when mothers are having babies, they get an incredible dump of oxytocin. Now this is not, by the way, OxyContin. OxyContin is an opiate. Oxytocin, that's not what we're talking about. Oxytocin, that's another channel. Yeah, oxytocin makes us feel connected to one another. So, if you've ever had a baby, they put that baby on your chest, skin to skin, because it releases oxytocin and helps you actually feel bonded to your child. And they're doing this now with fathers in the delivery room, is this skin to skin contact with the baby helps make the father feel connected to the baby as well. So this is just how human beings are made. And so when I shake your hand, when I touch your shoulder, which is pretty much the limit for most business touch, then it releases oxytocin, not to the same degree as we get when we're bonding with a child, but that physical touch piece really does make us feel more connected to other people. So we miss all of the touch piece. And human beings are, I mean, we're pack animals. We like to be in groups. We like to be around other people. And so if we look at the history of human behavior, every time there's been a pandemic, there's been isolation. And after every pandemic, we've come back together. And I'll add one more channel of communication that most people never think about, which is smell. And so I'm
like, do I smell my clients?
Yes, you do. You do. So I'll tell this story. I'm in the Chicago O'Hare Airport. I'm flying home. I've got my seat assignment, my boarding pass, and there are 3 flights in front of mine going to my hometown on the same carrier. And I think I can get an earlier flight. So I walk up to the gate and say, I'm not checking bags. If you've got a free seat, I'd like to get on early. And so I've got my seating assignment, I got my boarding pass, and within 20 minutes, and I've got my flight and 3 others. Within 20 minutes, I'm freaking out. I'm starting to get nervous. And I think, I wonder why I'm getting nervous. I got my seat assignment, I got my boarding pass. I don't know why I'm getting nervous. And I thought, well, maybe they're like pheromones coming out and they're making me nervous. And I said, when I get home, I'm going to check that out, which didn't happen that day. Nobody got out that day. So I slept on a friend's couch. The next day I got home, then I started researching it. And so they did this experiment years ago where they did a thing called an fMRI, a functional magnetic resonance imaging study. And so it's an MRI, and they add on to it a thing called a PET scan, where they have you inhale radioactive glucose. Maybe you might want to sign up. And it lights up the parts of your brain that are active in real time. So we can see, and it's a very useful research tool, fMRI, because we can see in real time what parts of the brain are active, because the brain uses glucose as its fuel. So they did this study where they had people, and it's going to be a little bit gross, but you'll never forget the experiment.
Thank you.
They have people exercise, and they get them all sweaty, and they have them lift their arms, and they take fabric and swab their underarms and say, thank you very much. And so they collected all this sweat from people who are exercising. Then they have those same people watch a scary movie. And in the middle of the most scary part, they have them raise their arms and they collect sweat from their underarms. Already it's gross, but it gets better. Then they have a second group of people who are going to get this fMRI. And as they're sliding them into the tube, they say, hey, we're going to have you breathe through this piece of fabric. And it's fabric of the sweat collected from other people. Nobody wants to sign up for this experiment. So half of the people are getting tested or getting their brain scanned while they're breathing through sweat from exercise, and half through sweat from fear. Now, there are these 2 structures in your brain called the amygdala that they're not I'll use the shorthand. They're the seat of all human fear. It's a lot more complicated than that, but we'll just go with that. And so they're looking at the amygdala to see what happens. So the people with the exercise sweat, they put them in there, and the amygdala are fine. They're not active at all. If people have the fear sweat, and again, these people being slid in don't know they're smelling sweat, and they don't know it's fear-induced sweat. What happens to those people is their amygdala light up. They're experiencing fear. So in other words, human beings are a lot like our dogs. We can smell fear. And so what we know is that human beings are far, and we don't have language for it, and we're not aware of it. And so when I was in the airport, I was in fact smelling fear, and it was infecting me. And so through olfaction, we infect other people with our emotions, which is why as leaders, it's so important to be self-possessed, to know, am I afraid? Because if I'm meeting with somebody in person, I'm infecting them with my emotion. And as a leader, people monitor my facial expressions, and I'm infecting them with my emotion. So emotions are contagious. So when we talk about in-person meetings, there are dozens of things that get missed through video that are part of our human condition. Some of which are valuable, some of which can be kind of negative. So part of the audience might be thinking, well, great, I'm never meeting in person so that I don't infect them with fear. Well, you don't infect them with the good stuff either, because emotions are contagious. You know, if we're happy, we're infecting people with our happiness as well, and our joy, whatever we're experiencing. So there's a lot there.
There is definitely a lot. Is there, because at the beginning of the pandemic, I was reading an article, a research article, which mentioned that actually the virtual world also helped people take a step back and go back in introspect on questions that we're asking them, that in person, that there would be so many stimuli and so many things that they wouldn't have that extra space that we have in person. So is there a type of meetings that on a behavioral aspect are more appropriate in person versus in virtual? And did you hear about that space that that allows us the virtual?
Yeah, I think that's a great, I'll maybe divide it up a little bit differently. The people who have really, really succeeded during the pandemic in virtual meetings are largely introverts. And Susan Cain has a wonderful book called Quiet. And she talks about how introverts have to act in an extroverted world. And it's really fatiguing for introverts. And what we see is that introverts have really been doing great in virtual work, because they need time and space for quiet reflection to do their best work. I mean, she talks about having a group of people, extroverts, brainstorm, and then an introvert be left alone to solve the problem. And you know what they found? Introverts were as good as a group of extroverts coming up with brainstorming it. So for introverts, not being so overwhelmed by all the stimuli is actually better for them to think, pause, and reflect. So there are people who have an advantage in a remote setting. Extroverts, however, really struggle because there's not enough stimulation to keep them going. So they get bored, and then they start looking at their phone
or one of the 72 tabs that they have open. And
exactly.
Oh, so that is really interesting. So knowing myself as an entrepreneur personally, like I'm pretty introverted person, except if I need to go on stage, whatever, I put, my superhero outfit on. And so knowing ourselves is, if we have a more of an introvert or extroverted tendency, and I do believe that nobody is just extroverted. Even the extroverted have days and situations and whatnot that need to be where they're introverted, and vice versa. But knowing ourselves and also knowing our clients.
Yes.
So knowing that I have a client that we maybe need to go on a delicate subject or something deeper, and they are introverted, maybe it's a good idea to say, you know what, how about we do this by Zoom?
Yeah, it depends on the content, and it depends on the person, which is why self-awareness is so important, and the awareness or empathy of your client or whoever you're working with is so important, to understand what is going to work best with them. There are some clients who prefer to talk to me over the phone because the face-to-face, eye-to-eye contact is too intimidating for them. And we'll see people do this in real life, that if there's too much intensity, they will look away. And I'll give you an example. We all do this in the elevator. I mean, you don't make eye contact with somebody in the elevator because they're afraid you're going to kill them. So we all look down, we look at our shoes, we look at the numbers, we make some sort of idle comment in order to de-stress the situation. Well, if you're talking about emotionally difficult conversations, eye contact face-to-face is sometimes more than some people can handle. So it's important to be aware of a person's level of comfort with interpersonal interaction and their level of comfort with the content that you're talking about. These are great points that you're making, Sarah.
I love that. So the level of content. Okay, so first, know self-awareness. Am I more introverted, extroverted first? Actually, before that, even like, do I have the right technology? Do I have a good mic? Do I have like those are still elements that
Absolutely.
If you have like a really bad sound, people can't tolerate that. They can tolerate like an image that's not super clear, but a bad sound, people can't tolerate that. So foundation. Second, am I more introverted or extroverted? Second, is my client more introverted, extroverted? And then the topic that I have to consider.
Yes, yes.
So how would I know, or how can an entrepreneur evaluate, oh, is this a virtual meeting topic, or is this an in-person meeting topic? How do I distinguish that?
I'm not sure I've got any hard and fast rules. If you want to get and gather data, the more channels of communication, the more data you can bring in, then you want to be in person. There's so many subtle signs to understand. If you believe that the force of your words is the only thing that's going to matter, you're probably deceiving yourself. So I would say the more important the meeting, the more important it is to have it in person. And then after that's video, after that's phone. And my advice is, don't try to solve any complex emotional problems with email or text, because it's just going to be a catastrophe.
Oh, yes. And we were talking about that the other day, where when we read an email or a text, I read it with my internal voice.
Yes.
So if that day I'm stressed, I'm anxious for whatever, I will read the email with that stress. If you're somebody I usually have conflict with, I will read the email as in a confrontation. No matter what you're trying, even if you're trying to be nice, I won't read it like that. So yeah, so email and text is good to transfer information with zero emotion in it, or few emotion in it,
And again, so much of human interaction is about emotion. It's so little about the content of our words and so much about everything else. So the more data rich way that you can get the information, the better. And I guess the next thing, Sarah, is it's asking the person, what's your level of comfort? And I will adapt to your level of comfort. So if you want to know what's the right kind of meeting, ask the person what they prefer. And there are many people that I interact with. I'm kind of an extrovert. I'm given my business, I like to have as much face-to-face communication as possible. But with some of the people I work with, they go, no, let's just do video, because they feel more comfortable with that. Okay, I can roll with that. So my job is to serve people. So I want to serve them in the way that's most comfortable for them, so that we can have the most positive experience.
So I like it. So it's not just deciding, oh, I'm going to do all virtual meetings, or oh, I'm going to go all back in person, but it's really the self-awareness, the awareness of other, and the topic. And I like how you say when we gather information, that would be a good opportunity to do an in-person. So if I'm meeting a client for the first time, gathering information to be able to read like body language, like the fidgeting foot or whatever that we don't see. And then after that, we can take it how I feel, how I am, how they are, and whatever the topic is. But do you agree that they now both have a place?
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. I think human beings, now that we have this technology, I think it's very helpful. I mean, it's been incredibly useful in the last 2 years. It will continue to be useful. But as I look at human behavior, we're pack animals, we're herd animals. We like to be together. If you look at hermits, back in history, there was a period of history where these Christian monks would go out into the desert and meditate, and they called them the desert fathers. And so you think, well, these are people who are alone. Well, these quote hermits gathered together in communities in the desert. So they went out to the desert to be alone and got together again. I mean, if you think of the brilliant irony of that, I'm going to be a hermit with a bunch of other hermits. Okay.
I can't talk because I love doing those kinds of things, but that's okay. I'm introverted, so I'm good.
And I get it. I mean, I'm surrounded by people I love who are introverted. And even the introverts who are going to be by themselves will do it with other people. If you look at people who go to these silent retreats, well, it's typically to a place where there are other people also in a silent retreat. So, I mean, it's just, the irony is just fun for me, but that's just how we are as people.
And one thing that, I am mostly an introvert, except when I need to be an extrovert. And I'm also an empath. So like I sense people. And I think that's also when people know themselves too, allowing and giving ourselves this space to pay attention what is behind the words that our clients are saying. So I'll have some clients, because I'm all on Zoom, like I'm all on virtual, and I have clients say things and I'll allow myself to say, I feel that there's something else or there's something different. And I think a lot of people don't allow themselves to use that sense, that, spider sense that they have. They sometimes use it in person, but they don't use it in virtual. And I don't know why, but like, it's even more important in virtual.
Yes, it's important everywhere. And it's so good that you brought this up. There are so many things about being a human that we don't have language for. Yeah. And so when you say, well, I get this sense, I have this intuitive sense, and because we can't put our finger on it, we go, well, I'm just making that up. No, you're not. You're gathering information that's turning on switches in your brain, and you may not have language for it, but it makes it no less real.
Yes.
And so I encourage people to be aware of it. There's a book called The Gift of Fear by a guy named Gavin DeBecker. He wrote it back, I think, in the 80s or the 90s. And he says, we trust our dog's impression of people more than we trust our own impression of people.
Oh my gosh, that's so true.
Well, what's the dog picking up? Well, the dog's picking up something that we're also picking up, but the dog doesn't discount it. We discount it. And the conclusion of his book, and it's kind of a scary read because he's studying serial killers. His conclusion is, you should pay attention to that data. Don't ignore it just because you don't have language for it. It's telling you something important. It tells your dog something important, and it's telling you something important. So just pay attention to it.
So I think that is why I love the virtual so much, because since I have less stimuli, personally, I'm able to connect with that better now than ever.
Yeah.
Which makes me able to pick up things that I wouldn't have picked up before and really, truly help my clients more and better.
Right. So if you think about it as data coming in, the way you're built, it's too much.
Yeah.
And so it overwhelms you. For some people, they're ignoring so many pieces already, it doesn't really matter. But for you, narrowing the amount of information coming through the pipeline allows you to read it more deeply. Well, that's probably true for lots of people.
So it's, oh my God. So this conversation about like in-person versus, it's so much deeper than the technology.
Well,
so much deeper than like the convenience of it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean the tech, and I'm really thankful for the technology. I mean, here we are, we're 2 time zones away, and we're having this live conversation, and other people can listen to it later. How wonderful is that? Mm-hmm. And it really is just a tool to help human beings connect. Mm-hmm. And human beings, even if we're introverts, even if we're hermits, we like to be connected.
Yes. So it's not one or the other. It's how can I make one and the other?
Oh, absolutely. It's like any tool that we get, but before they invented the wheel, lots was harder than, maybe they were, Neanderthals saying, gosh, I wish they wouldn't have invented the wheel. It's complicating life, but human beings are tool builders. We build tools to enhance our life so that we have better interactions with one another and improve the quality of our life. It's just about learning the tool.
And mixing them up. And there's a place also for in person.
Oh, absolutely.
With my friends, I don't do like, let's go for a Zoom coffee. I don't do that.
Those have been largely unsuccessful. Yes.
Those have, yes, but we've all done them in the beginning and we've all been unsatisfied for them. So that's where we see that the in-person, there's a place for the in-person, and there's an opportunity for different people in different ways and different topics to also do the virtual.
Absolutely. And it requires learning new sets of skills in order to be able to use that technology, the new tool better. I have a friend and a colleague who's remarkably good on video, and when he and I are facilitating a discussion on video, I just marvel at how good he is with the technology. And I'm like taking notes off screen, of course, so nobody knows that I'm doing that. But he's learned the tool even better than I have. And so I learn from him. And so it's just about learning the tool and figuring out when is it appropriate.
Oh, definitely. Roger, thank you so much. But before we go, where can people find you online? Learn more about you, people who love to geek out, you, what you do, how you help leaders and entrepreneurs. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, the easiest website to find me at is drrogerhall.com, drrogerhall.com. If you want to follow me on Twitter or on Instagram, you can follow me at Rogers 2 cents, ROGERS 2 cents. And I post videos about every Thursday, the little 30-second video. And then every day there's a quote of the day. So if you're a quote junkie, you'll get what I call the daily dose of mental marinade, so that you're soaking in something good every day.
And it's funny, sometimes just that little quote makes you go, okay, let's go. Yeah. Or challenges something that we're believing and whatnot. It's something that's very powerful.
So Rogers 2 cents and drrogerhall.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation.
I am grateful to have been invited. It's been fun to talk to you. Thank you for inviting me.
I don't know for you, but for me, it really answered a lot of questions. Yes, having virtual allows me to be able to go deeper into conversations, to be able to get and really catch what's not being said, and really use language that helps deepen conversation. As you know, I'm a psycholinguistic geek, so I love geeking out on the words and understanding different emotions that we attach to words. So when we put that and we attach it to what does in-person meeting do and what does virtual meeting do, it really changes everything. So that first that you decide to do in-person or virtual, my invitation here is know that your first question is, what do you like? Do you like in-person meeting? Do you prefer in a virtual meeting? It all starts with you. And once we make that decision, we assume that decision. I've had people who've texted me or send me messages, whatever, saying, do you do in-person coaching? I said, no, I'm all on virtual. They're like, okay, no, thank you. You got to be okay with it. But I know that I love the virtual. It doesn't mean that I never meet clients, because I do events, I'll do speaking, and I'll do workshops, in-person workshops and things like that. But in my one-on-one coaching, personally, I prefer that because it takes away all of the noise. And it's you and me right now. And we go deep into conversation. So first ask yourself, what do you like? And then you can see, okay, my different clients, what do they like? And adapt to that, because it's not one or the other. It's like everything else, it's one and the other. And once I know that I get to choose and they're both good, we see that so much more is possible. Thank you for being here week after week, and I'll see you next Tuesday.